Hello, everyone. Welcome. As the author and our authors get seated here today, you are actually our inaugural group for something new. We have an R.J. Julia Bookseller frequent flyer program that we are starting today, and you're our first group. So welcome. My name is Kathy Sayatillo, and I'm part of the events team here at R.J. Julia Booksellers. And I have to read from the script because literally you're the first group. So today kicks off our frequent flyer program. Here's how it works. For each person in the in-person event you attend between today and the end of the year, you'll receive a stamp. So I will prepare these. If you would like to become a member and do this, I'll prepare them and then you can get them at the end of the event. Attending an event with a best-selling author is a reward itself, but this fall we're upping up the game. After 5 events, you'll receive a $5 gift card and an R.J. Julia journal. Attend 10 events and you'll receive a $25 gift card and an R.J. Julia journal, plus a cool book lover sticker. This applies for in-person events both at our Madison store here, and for those of you who've also been to our Middletown store, as well as R.J. Julia hosted events that are off-premise. I think some of you have been to those. As you leave tonight, be sure to see me if you want one of these cards. I have the little punchy here. I made sure I tested it before we started. And if you have any questions, we have our events at rjjulia.com. And now on to the show. So that was that announcement. So this evening, we've been coveting our books I was able to read and see, so welcome. Welcome again. Here we have brand new books who are here. They're on the other side. We have lots from our authors, but really tonight we are celebrating Karen McManus and Nothing More to Tell. So there will be a signing after our session, and please do stay if you are able. As I was preparing tonight, there was so much to talk about, but I know you're here to listen to the conversation of authors, so I'll make this very quick. First, let me introduce Tochi Onyebuchi. And he will be in conversation with the author tonight. And we will have questions and answers at the end, but Tochi will lead the conversation. From right here in Connecticut, we have Tochi Onyebuchi is the author of Goliath, and his previous fiction includes Riot Baby. For those who haven't read it, wow. So in preparation for this, I get to read these cool things. It's really amazing. A finalist for the Hugo, Nebula, Locus, NAACP Image Awards, and so many more, including the winner of the New England Book Award for Fiction, and so much more. Also, the Beast Made Night series, the War Girls series. His short fiction has appeared in the Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy, the year's Best Science Fiction, and elsewhere. So much more about Tochi. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And then for our author, Karen McManus, she's a #1 New York Times and international best-selling author of young adult thrillers. Her books include the One of Us is Lying series, which has been turned into a television show on Netflix and Peacock, as well as standalone novels. Two Can Keep a Secret, The Cousins, You'll Be the Death of Me, and Nothing More to Tell. We have those in the other rooms. Karen's critically acclaimed award-winning work has been translated into more than 40 languages. Again, as I was preparing tonight, I learned that Karen writes what she would have loved to read. Aha. Clearly, there are many who agree with Karen's taste in reading. Also, I just can't help but mention that one of Karen's books was an answer on Jeopardy in 2022. So be sure that your cell phones are silenced. Let's enjoy this discussion together. Please welcome Karen McManus and Tochi Onyebuchi. Thank you.
Oh man, thank you all for being here today. Karen, we were talking before the event about the last time that we'd seen each other in person, and it might have been like 3 years ago.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime, right? I mean, we've all just started to kind of go out and about again, but that was probably the last time I was traveling extensively.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of us have tried to varying degrees of success, like right during the pandemic. And you mentioned, I believe, in the acknowledgments that Nothing More to Tell is your pandemic book. So I was wondering if you could start us off by talking about a little bit you know, how this came together, what the process was like, whether it was like, you know, sort of like salvational, because like sometimes work can be like that. It's like, let me not pay attention to like all of that.
Everything else. Yeah, no, when everything first happened, you know, March 2020, I was actually editing my 5th book, and that felt comforting, because that was a world I knew, it was characters I knew. I was like, okay, I can do this. And I finished it and sent it off, and I was like, oh, right. I got a 2nd book in this contract, and now I have to actually write it. And it was, you know, sometimes ideas you can say exactly when you got them. Like one of us is lying, I got that idea when I was driving to work and I heard the Breakfast Club theme song. And it was just instantaneous, you know, and I'll always remember that. This book was a little bit more, it took more time, and it was a couple different things. Like, this is gonna sound terrible, but I always wanted to kill a teacher. On the page.
Who's among us?
Because there's such important relationships. Now, obviously, I write about young people. They're in high school. You know, these are formative years, and these can be really important relationships. And I love the book, The Secret History. And there's a teacher in it called Julian Morrow, who is just fascinating to me. He's charismatic and he's charming, and the students adore him, but they don't really know him, and they can't see his flaws. They don't see him as a real person. And I thought that would be such an interesting character to build a mystery around. So that was like little idea 1, but it's not a book, you know, it's just a thought. And then I had been brainstorming cold case ideas, and it's a spoiler, so I can't tell you what I came up with, but it was basically this idea. And I thought, what if I put those things together? And so then I started writing, probably like June of 2020, and it just wasn't clicking. It wasn't clicking at all. And I thought, well, it's probably just because everything, it's not me, it's not the book, it's the world. But I kept going, and it just, you know, I don't know if you had this, but like, there's no energy to a book. And it feels terrible because, you know, if I'm bored, everyone else is going to be so bored. So I got maybe 5-6 chapters in, took a step back, and was like, why isn't this working? And started trying all kinds of stuff, you know, like different opening, different this, different that. And I was emailing my poor agent, and I was like, here's a new chapter 1, read this. And then 5 minutes later, no, don't read that. Here's another one. No, don't read that either. Okay, here's a whole different, here's 6 chapters, what do you think? And she's like, please stop. Just tell me when you have something that's ready for me to look at, or why don't we brainstorm? And one of the weird little things I did just to try and shake this book out of whatever was wrong with it was I took a couple side characters from You'll Be the Death of Me, and I stuck them as the main character. And that was never going to work, but I was like, oh, the characters are wrong. And I completely recreated the characters from the ground up. Like, Bryn and Trip are not who I started with. They were different names, different people, different relationships, different backstories. But once I figured them out, the whole thing came together. So it was partly pandemic and just everything was hard, but it was also, I hadn't nailed the characters. And they're, for my books, they're the most important thing.
And they, like, oh my goodness, they are so good in this book. Like, I mean, it's funny because oftentimes when I'm like engaging with mysteries and thrillers, whether I'm reading them or watching them, I'm just like, you know what? I'm not that smart a dude. I'm just gonna be along for the ride. I'm just gonna, and whoever it is at the end, I'm just gonna. But like, it speaks to how engaging this book was that I was like actively trying to figure it out as I was reading. I was like, okay, I think I see what she's doing here. I think, okay, that looks like a red herring. Is that a red herring? I don't know if that's a red herring. Maybe she's trying to psych me out, and this isn't a red herring, and it's actually the. No,
that
so
is
like,
my dream, by the way, to do that to you. So I'm really happy to hear that.
It was wild, and then like, I mean, y'all know when you read this book, by the time you get to the end, it's going to be wild for you. But like, one thing that I found really, really, really interesting about the book is that you dive into true crime reporting.
Yes.
Very, very, very heavily in this book. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, because you know we're really like in the weeds, particularly you know the you know this like new age that we're in now with podcasts and you know non-traditional
so
media. Yeah. So talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, probably not surprisingly, I enjoy a good true crime story.
Who would have guessed?
Yeah, it's just a little surprising thing about me that you just learned. So I like podcasts and Dateline, you know, all of that. But I think, for all of us who enjoy and, consume true crime, it's a very fine line that we have to walk, because of course it's fascinating. And trying to understand the darker side of human nature is, I think, something that we all struggle with and want to understand, even though sometimes it's not really understandable. But these are real people, too. So it's like, you don't want to be ghoulish, you don't want to be gleeful. You want to be respectful, and you want to acknowledge the loss, even at the same time as you're being drawn into the story. And that was part of what I wanted to show with this book is Bryn doesn't start out wanting to be a true crime journalist. She wants this internship, and she wants to solve her teacher's murder. But what she finds as she gets deeper and deeper into it is like the human side of it is something she was not expecting. Realizing that these people she cares about, that she knows, are potentially suspects. Realizing that her teacher isn't maybe exactly who she thought he was, that he had flaws she didn't understand, and he might have agendas that she was not aware of. And I think that's something, as we look in this environment that's ever expanding, it's just interesting to keep in mind that when you drill down to the human level, it's very different.
Yeah, no, like I found that exploration of that issue, like the ethics of true crime reporting, was very, very, very well done here, because there are consequences to investigations and the ways in which you conduct these investigations, and to see Bryn sort of learn through trial by fire what that is like was like really like that in and of itself could have been a whole novel. I thought that was really, really, really cool. I mean, another aspect that I found very interesting, and that hit like very close to home too, because like I also went to a high school in Connecticut, was the way that you tackle class in this book. And it's not just, there are rich kids at this private school and there are scholarship kids at this private school. There's a lot of like class mobility, and even if it's this very sort of stratified system, you have kids that start out as scholarship kids, but then their parents get a new job and all of a sudden they can afford tuition. So like talk a little bit about how you thought about and tackled social mobility in this book, and particularly like in this environment.
Yeah, and one of the things about this crime that I think made it so not hard to solve, but almost no one tried that hard to solve it, was because of the kids involved. One of them is one of our protagonists, Trip, and he is a scholarship kid. He has no money. He was in the woods with his science partner, supposedly doing a project, and another student who was also working with them. But those students have very wealthy families, very influential families. And when everything went down, and one of the boys, his name was Shane, is literally found with his hands on the murder weapon, covered in blood, and he says, "I found him this way." If that was a different kind of kid, that could have gone very differently. But because it was these two students, and because their families were so important to the community, they, their story is accepted. And as Bryn realizes years later, they got to be kids, which is not always the case for young people who are caught up in crimes. So there's that aspect. And then there's the fact that Trip, even though he is not one of them, becomes one of them. He sort of gets pulled into this group, and by the time Bryn returns, he's one of the elites of the school. And even though he doesn't really belong there, and he so doesn't belong there that his friends don't even know where he lives. Because he was embarrassed at one point, and then he never corrected them. And Bryn is like, she can't understand this. Like, how do they not know they're your best friends? But that's just kind of the dynamics that have been established.
And like that was such a like detail, because like if not having friends like over at your house, because you're like their house has like multiple floors, or they have like multiple houses, so there's no way I'm gonna let them see how I live. Like that was so real to me. I was just like, I had to like put the book down for a second. No, but like I just think it was really cool, because it made the world of this book feel very lived in. And I feel like oftentimes with stories that are like set on campuses or in and around campuses, they can often feel like a bubble, but like you bring us into like what it's like outside in the larger town and towns, because like there are points where we're like, we abut the border of like the next town
Right.
over. And so talk a little bit about that, like how important it was that we also got glimpses of what it was like off campus.
Well, because it is a private school, and not all the kids live in this town. And what makes this school kind of unique is it's called St. Ambrose, and it's a sort of an expensive school, but it's in this run downtown. It's named Sturgis. It's not cute.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a cute
Yeah.
little town. And so the kids who are scholarship students tend to be the local kids from this town that just families don't have a lot of money, so they don't either. And the kids who pay tend to be kids who aren't able to get into more competitive schools, so they are not, you know, the particularly strong students. So it sort of makes the divide even greater in that you have kids who have to work really, really hard for everything, and then you have kids who aren't working all that hard for anything. And most of those kids don't live in this town, so they're not even really part of the community other than the school community.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was like so well done here. I mean, so another, I guess as a writer, y'all have to put up with me because I'm obsessed with process and like craft and stuff. So if I'm asking a lot of like structural like craft questions and whatnot, that's really just me engaging with my own obsessions.
Yeah. We nerd out.
Exactly. But like, tell me about the decision to have multiple POVs in this book.
Well, that's kind of my thing.
That, yeah, like,
That's
you
my
know,
thing.
because like there are a couple ways this book could have been written, but I think the way that it came out like this, like, was very specific.
Yeah, and I love a good multi-POV story because I've always loved, first of all, I love ensembles.
Yeah.
You know, I just like a team. I like a team of people that starts out like not so much a team and they get thrown together and they have to work together. That's my favorite trope ever. So I basically recreate it with every single book over and over again. But I also like it because I like to see characters from the other characters' point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I also like to get more than one perspective on things that are happening. I think especially in a mystery, that's really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And again, just from like a technical point of view, having dual narrators lets you build suspense because you can kind of go all the way to an edge where you're about to reveal something and then just end that chapter.
Some of these chapter endings, I was like, come on, Karen, come on.
Nope, moving on.
Yeah, it's like, give me just like an extra 5 seconds in this scene. There's like something really important's about to be revealed. I just need like half a page more. And she was like,
Can't do it.
no.
No, switching.
So you mentioned how much you were a fan of true crime podcasts before. One thing I'm also really interested in is like what other like inputs you have in terms of like, you know, TV or movies or music even that helps sort of fill the well for you creatively. Was there anything specifically that you drew on, particularly for Nothing More to Tell? Or like during that time that you were putting this book together?
Yeah, during that time, I actually I rewatched the movie Scream, you know, which I love.
Classic.
It's a classic, yeah. And one of the things about Scream that I think is so smart is, I mean, it does a lot of things really well, but ultimately, the crime is so personal. You know, it's just like you get very close into your protagonist, you know, and everything ties together to your protagonist. And that was one of the things I thought about, because we talked a little bit about this out there. There are a couple different ways the story could have gone, you know, and one of them would have been a little darker than what I ended up with. But the important thing was keeping it very, very personal to the two people who were at the center of it, you know, so not having it be, you know, something that sort of fell outside their inner circle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's, oh my goodness. Yeah, when you make it personal, like it. Sorry, I'm just like gushing at this point because it's so well, and like it's just like a thing that I can't do. Like there are a lot of things as a writer that I feel confident I can pull off, but like I could not have written this book. So I'm just like in awe. No, but like so it's interesting because, you know, Scream is horror. So do you find yourself like, you know, engaging with other genres when so
I mean,
like,
I love
yeah.
horror.
Oh,
I would like to write it someday. I'm not sure I'll get the stomach for it, you know, to do it well. I love to read it. I mean, probably the most formative author for me growing up was Stephen King.
Yeah.
I started reading Stephen King when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I was not supposed to be reading Stephen King, but but I did. And I loved it. So definitely, I love horror, but I also really just like contemporary, and I like contemporary romance. And you know, when I say I wanted to write books that I wish I could read when I was a kid, I used to love mysteries, and I loved horror, and I loved murder, and I was like, but what's the cute romance? Like, shouldn't they also fall in love while solving a murder?
Just kiss.
That would
Like,
be so
yeah.
cute.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So I want to have that aspect
Yeah.
too, because that's what I always enjoyed. That sort of gets me flipping pages. It's like, let's see where this relationship is going here.
No, definitely, and also for all the aspiring writers in the crowd, if you want to read expertly constructed novels, read romance novels.
Romance, yes.
Like
the
those
pacing is
oh my God.
impeccable.
They know what they are doing to the T. It's like, it's immaculate. Like,
Yeah.
you will get through the end and you'll be like, chef's kiss.
Yeah, yeah.
The romance novel, like, they are a masterclass in storytelling. So of course
100%.
it's of course no surprise that, like, you know, romance novels are part of your literary diet.
And it works really well when I lay the whole thing out, you know, and I think like big beats. There's like, okay, there's the mystery beats, obviously, and there's the individual character beats, their own journeys. But then there's like the relationship beats too, you know? And as it turns out, romance beats fit in really well with murder beats. I
Who
don't know.
knew? Like, who
knew?
could have guessed? Who could have guessed?
But there's a lot, you know, the same sort of peaks, the same, you know, moments of despair, all of that works together.
No, I mean, it's love and death, you know, all the way back to the Greeks.
Yep.
That's cool. So what are you, this is something I'm very curious about. So, like, what are you reading / watching / listening to now?
So I'm not reading that much because I'm drafting.
Yeah.
And when I draft, I don't like to have anything sort of crowding in. I will say I'm giving the new Game of Thrones a chance, even though I swore I would not after the last
Got
season.
pretty burned after the last season. Yeah,
was not
pun intended.
happy with that, but I'm enjoying it. So I love a good high fantasy. I mean, that's one of those things. I think sometimes, you know, when you're a creator, you just really admire the stuff that you know you could not do.
Yeah.
You know, like high
I
fantasy.
mean, case in point.
I can't do it. But I love to watch it. I love that like world building and just being swept away.
No, definitely. I mean, I have to say, I would very much like to see your take on it. Like, no pressure, no pressure. But so I guess you know, so you're drafting now. How much can you tell us about what's next?
So I mean, what's immediately next or closest next is actually done, and that is the next One of Us is Lying book. For those of you who don't know, there's going to be a third book.
You heard it here first.
And, and I can't say that much about it yet, but it is, I think, coming out next summer, like around the same time. And it's a mix of POVs from the first two books. So it was the first time I felt ready to go back into the heads of some of my original four, so that was really fun. And what was kind of cool about that book for me was that when I first wrote One of Us is Lying, there was a plot thread that kind of explained the motivations of some really key characters, but it was extremely distracting. It didn't fit very well. And my agent told me to take it out. And I was like, but then how will I explain X, Y, and Z? And she's like, well, you just have to make them that kind of person, which was really brilliant advice. So that's what I did. And she was right. It did not fit.
Yeah.
But I always sort of wished I had it.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, could I spin that out somehow into its own story? And the next thing I knew, that had turned into One of Us is Back. So it's, even though I never intended to write 3 books, I did write it as a standalone, it does kind of feel like I'm now telling the whole story, which is cool. And then I'm working on what will be book 8, I think. But it's so early.
Yep.
It's
oh, I know how
it could very much change.
Yeah.
But that'd be like, you know, the 2024 book, because this is how we do it. Like 2 years before you're working on the thing.
Oh yeah. Oh, publishing timelines. They are. Oh. Anyway.
And then, you know, when we launched these books, we're like, this was 2 years ago. I don't remember any
Yeah, no,
of
it's
this.
like, wait, so who are my main characters?
And what's his name?
Yeah, like how many were there in the woods again? Oh, I absolutely relate. Like, if any of y'all like ask me questions about Riot Baby, it's heads or tails whether to like actually answer with any authority. But to that point, so you know, if I'm checking my phone, it's not me being a rude millennial. It's me like it's where I have my notes and stuff. But what I wanted to do is actually like open it up to questions for a little bit, because I imagine, you know, y'all have been a very attentive audience, but I imagine you would get pretty mad at me if I monopolized Karen for the whole night. So feel free to raise your hands and ask. The acoustics are pretty good in here, so you know, no microphones are necessary. Yes.
So when you're writing, do you know how it's gonna end, or is it like coming to you as you write?
I think I know. I definitely outline. I have a end goal in mind. Occasionally it does change. I would say the book that changed the most with was "Two Can Keep a Secret." That book I actually wrote 3 times with a different murderer each time. So if everybody seems suspicious, it's because at one point they did it. I don't recommend writing a book that way, by the way. It was neither efficient nor was it fun. And that actually changed my process a lot. You know, I stress test my ideas a lot more. And that's why when I knew something was up with this one, I adjusted. But yeah, I know the big moments, but a lot of times I don't know the little side mysteries fully that I create. Sometimes that happens as I write. And, you know, I always like leaving a little knife twist on the last page, and I don't always know what that's going to be at the beginning. That is often something that comes to me about halfway through.
Oh, the knife twist is so good in this book.
Just when you think you're out.
Oh my goodness! Like how? Because like I was like, oh wait a second, they're like 8 pages left. We're not done here. And then I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Excuse me while I pick myself up off the floor.
Excellent. Yeah.
You were talking about beats in the story, and
Yeah.
I was wondering, do you use like the Save the Cat?
I do.
Okay.
That was a transformative thing that I started using with "Two Can Keep a Secret." I didn't even know what it was. But it's, for those who don't know, it's a screenwriting tool. And it's just an Excel document. You know, you download it from the internet, and it helps you sort of plot out, because like every story has an arc, roughly, that it should be following, that your audience just kind of intuitively expects, you know, like the normal opening, and then the inciting incident, and the rising action, and the midpoint, and all that stuff. I, having never taken a class in creative writing, I was unaware what you call those things. And so pacing was very difficult for me. And knowing, you know, those big moments was something that I was struggling with that book. So that's when I started using Save the Cat. I've since kind of like modified it a little bit for my particular style of writing, but I find it really useful. And for anyone who's starting out, I definitely recommend checking it out. It might not work for you, not everybody likes it, but I really like it.
I went and spent 2 years in film school to learn about that. Paid a ton of money I didn't have.
You download an
I know
Excel
you downloaded-
spreadsheet.
Yeah, Save the Cat. It would have saved me a lot of money.
But screenwriting in general, I think,
Yeah.
is fantastic to study for novel writing. And I also am very interested in some of the character tropes that are common in screenwriting, particularly because I like ensembles. So things like a power trio, where you've got the cynic, the realist, and the optimist. Those are types that work really well together in a story. So there's lots of things like that where you can just read a little background, you start getting ideas about how characters can maybe connect to each other or be in conflict.
Yeah, and it's really cool too because, like, you know, movies, particularly when they exist in a certain genre, there's a formula, and like how they manage to follow that formula while at the same time being unique.
Right.
You want a storytelling clinic? Watch a Pixar movie. Like it's all the same, and like you can pause it at like the 20-minute mark. You can pause it at the halfway point. You can pause it at like the 45-minute mark, and you will get like it's the same thing over and over and over again. But at the same time, it breaks your heart and lifts your heart like all the way every single time.
And when you're watching it, you never think, oh, yep, here we are in the middle. You know,
Exactly.
It's seamless and it's very smooth, but it's absolutely mathematical in how they lay the story out.
Oh, so Pixar and Marvel movies, like Marvel movies.
Yeah, Marvel too.
Like, oh, they do it so well. But yeah, like I think that's a really, really important point, is that, you know, figuring out how to exist in a formula, or like make a formula yours, and I think that's something that you manage through your like body of work to do really, really, really well.
Thank you. You know, we're speaking about universes too, Marvel universe. It was so fun when they all start coming together. One of my favorite things about this book is that because it had a true crime backdrop, I was able to leave Easter eggs for all of my other books. You know, they're just mentioned as an aside. It's not spoilery at all. And if you haven't read those books, you won't care, you won't notice. But for people who have, it's just kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
And it also establishes that yes, all of this takes place in the same universe where teenagers are solving crimes constantly.
I love
Mostly on the
shared
East
universe.
Coast,
Yeah.
not entirely.
Yeah, exactly. When you break out to like the Midwest and the West Coast,
They're on their own.
exactly. Yeah, it's like you're bringing Kang into the equation. No, I love the shared universe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's fun. Yeah.
I'd like to ask kind of a political question at this point. With all of the book banning that's going on right now, how do you feel about that? And do you keep that in your mind as you're writing?
It's horrible. It's so disappointing, and especially, I mean, I think we can all pretty well identify what books are being banned. You know, they're typically books by marginalized authors. They're typically books that relate to race or gender or sexuality. My books are not often targeted, although I will say, Two Can Keep a Secret ended up on like an obscenity list for the state of Oklahoma, and I was like, what? That is my least obscene book. Have you not read One of Us is Lying? But again, like for me, that was unusual. And then I think they end up dropping the whole thing and whatever. But you know, what I keep in mind is that I am not going to write to that kind of thinking, you know. And again, like my books, I'm a straight white woman, right? But I want to write a diverse world. And I want to write a world where all my characters are accepted. And I want to be true to, you know, the crime world as I see it, which is often unfair to some of my characters. So yeah, I keep all of that in. I'd love to hear your take too.
I mean, I've been, my books have been kind of sort of under the radar, so like the like roving spotlight of the people that write the banned list haven't quite like detected me yet. But yeah, no, like I don't worry about that when I write, especially because like, you know, I grew up in the age of like Napster and LimeWire, and like if there was music that we wanted, we were going to get it.
Right.
You know, and so I feel like for, you know, particularly our audience, if there are books that they want, they're going to find a way to get it.
Yeah.
Like they're going to find a way. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of the ban lists, they're less for the kids than they are for like the adults. Like to signal to the adults, hey, this is what we're doing, these are our values or whatever. But like, I don't know, they never really seem to keep the kids in mind. And like, the kids are the ones, like our readers are the ones that are like, that like want this. I mean, like there's a reason you're as popular as you are. Like the kids, like they get this and they want this, and so, you know, that's really who I'm writing for. So.
Well, part of the reason I ask is because I have a 10-year-old granddaughter who said to me the other day, why did they put Charlotte's Web on the banned list? I have no answer. I have no answer for it.
It's impossible to understand some of these lists.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there was like Dr. Seuss was featured
Dr.
pretty
Seuss?
heavily on one of them. Yeah.
Some of them there's no rhyme or reason to it.
That's socialist Dr. Seuss. Sorry. Green Eggs and Ham, Communist Manifesto, same thing. Same thing.
Yeah, we hate that. But yeah, it's you know, it's something the publishing industry just is dealing with right now, and it's not pleasant. But you know, what's heartening, I think, is that there are so many people who are standing up for authors and standing up for readers, and making their voices known. So we're not like alone in this fight.
No, absolutely. And you know, I think the big part of our support is readers like yourselves who, you know, come to events and buy books and request books at your libraries and all, especially like that part.
Yeah.
Because libraries are often sort of in the target for a lot of these. these efforts, and so anything that can be done to support libraries
Yeah,
and
supporting
support,
librarians at
Yeah.
schools and towns.
like that's always really, really, really cool.
And
So-
that seems like a perfect segue to invite all of you, not only to come pick up your new frequent flyer here at RJ Julia, but also to join us in the room next door for a signing and maybe perhaps some additional questions, and also to join me in thanking Tochi and Karen for this wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.